Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we are back after an Austrian 2024 Grand Prix. Chris, what's up?
Yeah, exciting weekend, sprint weekend. Already forgot about the sprint race though, but let's just get into the most exciting thing that happened the weekend. Everyone's talking about it. Hans Zimmer on guitar in the opening ceremony. What was that? That was a huge surprise. But
At first I didn't know who the hell it was, and I was like, oh shit, that's Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, like he's opening with the anthem. That was really cool. But no, obviously we're talking about the clash between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. Good friends. Give me your thoughts on what you think went down here.
So the majority of the drama took place on probably the back third of the race. So if we just break it down real quickly, in lap 40, Max started reporting some issues with his tires. The hards really weren't serving their purpose, and then they had a slow stop in lap 51, a little under 7-second pit stop. Allowed Norris to close the gap a little bit more. By lap 52, Verstappen locks up a little bit closer. Norris gets. This is kind of where it steams up a little bit. On lap 55, Norris is only like less than half a second behind Verstappen, and Verstappen covers the line. Norris complains to the stewards, which is actually a great trope for this week, is McLaren tattletaling a lot. But can't knock them. They every advantage you can get. By lap 63, Norris overtakes Verstappen, who goes off road. He has to get the position back. He complains to the stewards again, but Verstappen doesn't get track position back to him. So Norris goes around the outside, and in lap 64 is where he makes contact with Verstappen, punctures both cars. Not gonna lie, it seems like it took Russ fucking forever to catch up to take P1, but he finally did it. It was enough time for David Coulthard and Alex Jax to lose their fucking shit. And then I was like, where the hell is Russell? And it was crazy because these guys were lapping other cars like Joe and all these guys. So it was kind of confusing to see like all these different cars up on the front of the track, and none of them correlated to the visuals that they provide you for race position. So yeah, it was a hell of a last third of the race. I love seeing George getting in there in P1. It's just, people are saying F1's back. It sounds so stupid when people say it like that. But I guess, Charles Leclerc had a tough week. So I guess F1 is back.
F1 is definitely back. No, it was crazy that, I don't know if you watched the pre-race show or any kind of lead up, but they actually foreshadowed this.
I know. Yeah. No, I'm glad you talked about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they brought they showed a close-up shot of the front wing, and I guess there's like a really sharp, pointy part on the back end of the front wing, and they were like, this is what everyone's scared about. This thing's going to get a puncture. I got to stay away from the McLaren front wing. And then, lo and behold, there we have it,
They also had some more foreshadowing, I think, when they were like the first couple of graphics where they break down the starting lineup and where everyone's going to be positioned, and they're like, yeah, if George could just kind of keep it in P3, he might get a win. They were just kind of, yeah. And I was just like, because I saw it afterwards again, like the replay, and I was like, holy shit, like that's, I guess you have to account for all possibilities, and like it was just funny that George was able to sweep this win up.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I actually watched that replay because I was watching the video where Toto Wolff, embarrassed himself. According to him, the worst thing he's ever done in 12 years at Mercedes is excitedly come over the radio while George is in a braking zone, going, "George, you could win this!" And then George comes over.
Yeah, he was like, "George, you can win this. You can win this, George." And I was like, "What are you like? What? I've never heard you come over the radio like this. Like, what the fuck was that?"
Yeah, he's like a giddy 12-year-old, like, oh my God, we're back. I haven't won a race in 2 years. Like, this is exciting.
Yeah, you can tell he got a stiffy.
Yeah, 100% half chub. But then George comes back over the radio, just let me fucking drive, which is kind of funny.
I'm sure he came his pants when George was like, just let me drive. Toto was like, yes.
Yeah, yes. Like you said, it took him forever to catch Max and Lando. because they were like, Max is going slow, Max is going slow. And then I was watching the video and I'm like, where is
Yeah, I think
Max?
George was like still 15 seconds behind when that happened.
Yeah,
Like I
it
was
took
just like,
a long
I was like, where the fuck is this guy? Like he was 15. I mean, it just goes to show like pure pace wise, McLaren's and in Lando's hands at least have really put their shit together and caught up to Red Bull at least for the time being, and I'm sure through the rest of this season. But that was, I mean, that was fun to watch. You know, just some race, you know, some real wheel to wheel contact. Max getting, you know, going back to his old ways and kind of showing shades of 2021 where things aren't as gravy as they were in 2022, you know, and he had to really kind of dig deep. And what that looks like for Max Verstappen is like he will put his elbows out. He will completely deny any kind of fault. Christian Horner will also deny any kind of fault as long as Max Verstappen is agreeing to stay at Red Bull. And it got Andrea Stella to kind of talk up a bit. Why don't you take us through what Andrea Stella had to say?
Well, Andre Stella, and I think a few other people too, basically were very vocal about what happened. And Andre Stella said, if you don't address these things, honestly, they'll never come back, or they will come back. They weren't addressed properly in the past, referencing Max versus Lewis in 2021, when there were fights with Lewis that needed to be punished in a harsher way. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people around the paddock, especially McLaren, just kind of pointing fingers at Max and saying, this guy just doesn't have the ability to let go, let someone by. And actually, I forget who it was, but someone in the paddock said Max should have just let him go. He's ahead in the championship, just preserve his second place. I don't agree with that because you can't tell a competitor to like just lose on purpose just for the sake of your championship. That's what not he's there for. But I'm actually really curious what your thoughts are just on like the whole blame game before I give my opinion on the matter because I have a pretty strong one.
I mean, I think it was Verstappen's fault, right? Like he covered the line, the racing line that I think Norris had a right to, and then Max kept saying that he's just lunging out of nowhere, and that's not how you overtake. But Max, I think it's in his DNA. I think I listened to a couple other podcasts this week about it, and they always like brought up like Schumacher and Senna and how they had the similar like kind of my way or the highway kind of mentality, and that's cool and all. Like I'm not here to knock that. The thing I'm here to knock is like at what point is there going to be rules placed that I guess there were instances in this race where Esteban Ocon did the same thing to Pierre Gasly, and then they didn't do shit to Esteban Ocon either, you know. So, and we'll talk about Alpine later on. Don't you worry, but I don't know. Maybe there's a consistency, I can't really fault the stewards on this one because they were pretty consistent with the doling out of kind of penalties. Uh, I don't think Esteban Ocon got a penalty for putting Pierre out of or kind of pushing him out of the racetrack. But yeah, this one I guess like you are the way that you are when things are like at their hardest, right? You'll really show your true colors, and this is just kind of Max doing that, right? I'm not too surprised. I guess like when you have like a super duper dominant car and you can just be all happy and giddy all the time, like and not worry about it, then that's what 2022 was. But and most of 2023, and now this is going to be a different story for Red Bull, right? And I think this is just Max responding to kind of pressure he hasn't had in over a year.
Yeah, I mean, parts of that I agree with, parts of that I don't. But I mean, Max probably would have just been in Dreamland anyways if he. I mean, he was on used mediums and Lando was on new, so there was a pace differential, and then he had the botched pit stop, which let Lando catch up that 7 seconds right onto his heels. If that had happened, he probably would have coasted to victory, or at least much closer. But like my strong opinion here is like I don't care whose fault it is. Max's fault, Lando's fault, 50-50, whatever. I I want the wheel to wheel racing. I want people to race hard. I don't want F1 to become like American basketball where you just foul, throw free throws, foul, throw free throws, like just calling penalties, calling for stewards all the time. Like, in my opinion, it was hard racing. And I think Lando did really hard dive bombs that were unnecessary, hoping just to sort of catch Max off guard. Like he went really, really deep once, locked up, went off track. And like if that could have easily caused a collision as well. But that's fine. Like it was fine. He like took a shot and it was fine. And I just don't I'm so tired of F1 being passing with DRS on a straight when it's like safe and you have a much higher like speed because of the DRS and that's it. I just don't want it to become like pass when I have DRS, that's it. I want there to be wheel to wheel racing. I want there to be aggressiveness from these guys. I think that's what makes it exciting and what earns you a championship. I saw two replays on Reddit this week where one was where Carlos Sainz was fighting with Max Verstappen, where Carlos pushed him off in the exact same turn, and Max what he did is went extra wide, went over the white line, and then switched back and took the inside line and actually got a better exit from that and took the place back from Carlos. And the same thing happened with Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. Same turn, same way, just went extra wide, turned in, and was able to do it. And Lando was just like, don't get me wrong, Max, cut him off a little bit, but I think Lando could have profited in that scenario. Instead, it seemed like he got a little just frustrated and pissed that Max is pushing him off wide and ultimately just begrudgingly didn't give up his line and caused a collision. Whether it's Max's fault or Lando's fault, it's probably both their faults. They were both being hotheads, both being aggressive. But, let's just say it's highly Max's fault. Max has a lot less to lose here. He's like huge up in the championship. I think Lando has had issues closing races and being in these type of situation because he hasn't really been in them before. And Max can crash out and probably still win the championship. So they're not going to give him a race ban or anything like that. And if he's a dick, it is what it is. But you're here to win. So, anyways, I want hard
Well,
racing.
I mean, but we had the opposite reaction when Lando would concede to Max like he did last year, where he was like, he didn't even race him that hard. And we specifically had episodes, Chris, where we were like, what the fuck? Why aren't you racing Max harder? So like, which way do you want it? Like, do you want to just let them race hard and like kind of like whatever the chips may fall, they may fall, or like because to use your basketball analogy, like every player, if they hit six fouls, you're out. If you hit two flagrants, you're out. Like that's it. But Max has had like a lot of like these incidences, and that's what I think Andrea Stella is trying to point out is that like this is like a habitual thing and because he's high profile, like you guys aren't gonna like, or what other political, capital like him and Jost has around the paddock, like if you guys are taking those into consideration and not giving him a penalty, like, but then you'll give other people penalty. I think like in this local incidents, like that's why I kind of bounced this against like what Ocon did with Gasly. I think that the stewards had some sort of consistency in this race specifically. So I'm not going to go too hard against Verstappen or whatever. But I don't think I think racing is better when Lando Norris is able to fight for it instead of give up the position to Verstappen because that shit wasn't cool to watch. This is like much more fair in my mind of to like a product that you want an audience to watch is like heavy nose racing like and I think everyone is entitled to their opinion but in this instance I think Max covered the line he shouldn't have and he should have like let Lando overtake and Max's tires were failing on him consistently he said it over the radio and he didn't do that. He almost went into self destruct mode, which maybe is just vestiges of his previous. Maybe there is some sort of change that's taken effect over, but I don't think so. And to answer like kind of not to answer, but to kind of comment on is he going to win a WDC even if he let go of this race? Probably, but that constructors title is like really coming under threat right now for them, and I know that's a really big thing for them is to get the the dual pickup, the WDC and the constructors chip. I think McLaren is at 268, Red Bull's at 355, Ferrari's at 291. I mean, they're in striking distance, and it doesn't look like Sergio Perez is really helping the cause as much as he should be. I mean, unless you got anything to say about it, Chris, like let's talk about Sergio. He was fighting the Haas's throughout pretty much the entire race. At a certain point, at lap 61, by the end of the race, he's in P8. Like he's in between Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. So not the best place for a Red Bull to be, but knowing all that, do you think like they're at jeopardy of losing the Constructors' Cup, and do you think that's going to have an effect on Max's kind of demands of his team?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it does. Like, I definitely think Sergio is going to be a massive reason why they very likely won't win the Constructors' Cup. I mean, this race was very good uh, for Red Bull from the perspective of Max was able to get the car back to the pits and hang on to fifth place. And Lando DNF'd because just too much damage to his car, and they couldn't get the nose off and on properly. So they actually pulled away because Charles Leclerc didn't score points either. So that was a positive result for Red Bull. But and I think they didn't really cover it, but Sergio had damage to his car from lap one turbo and collision. I don't know how much downforce or pace he lost from it, but it was nowhere in the sprint as well. So I don't know what the tipping point is, because if Sergio's bringing massive amounts of sponsor money and merch money or whatever else it is to help pay Max's salary or to pay it in full, I don't know how long you can hold on, because it's going to be embarrassing at some point if your D2 driver is not even contending for podiums. So I think you said it last episode that Sergio, they'll give him at least this year at a minimum. But I don't know how ironclad the contract is, but something is going to have to change. I don't think that they can willingly give up a constructors cup.
I mean,
And
Red Bull is like a several billion-dollar entity, unless I'm wrong. I think like their entire entity with like the sports drink and all their other ancillary projects going on, they're like a multi-billion-dollar company. I
I
think they'll
did
be
this.
able to. What?
Sorry, I did this research for my other job.
Yeah,
Red Bull, the energy drink company, has more market value and more money than every other energy drink company combined. It's ridiculous how big they
yeah,
are.
yeah. I mean, like they pair well with vodka. It's awesome. But I don't think the money that Sergio is bringing in, it might offset a little bit of the spend that they have against Max. But at a certain point, if you're weighing like the odds or like I guess the value proposition of, I think they're just going to absolve that salary hit via the bigger company in order to get a driver in that seat who's going to lock in constructor championship for them. Uh, I don't know why it's not Yuki. We already talked ad nauseum about this. I'd be curious to see if they did put someone in there that was. The thing is, it's hard to figure out who would fill in that seat that wouldn't pose a threat to Max.
I think you put Liam in there, and Helmet made offshoot comments about that. I don't know if it holds any weight, but
I mean, but what is his standing with the team? Also, is like what I guess like the fallout of that entire incident that happened with Horner and the power struggle, that hasn't been fully resolved yet. I think Joe Verstappen recently went on record to um, say some shit about Christian again. So it's just like that's an ongoing drama. So like I don't like Helmet. They've already ditched their idea of AlphaTauri being a a feeder, uh, 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 racing team that's meant to, you know, bring up younger drivers. Like that plan's kind of been kaput for the past couple of years.
yeah, but that like the other interesting thing, and this is something that actually really pissed me off. I'd have to go back and look up who officially said it, but sometime in the last week or so, I think it was either Helmets or somebody at Red Bull said that you know that RB is a junior team, and like that, like they wanted to make a clear definition that that team is a junior team. And when you have a pinnacle, like could you imagine if you had like the LA Lakers, like the Clippers were like an officially like a collegiate team in the NBA or something like that, and their whole goal was to never win. It's just kind of
It's
it
ridiculous.
feels
Yeah,
it feels wrong to have a junior team officially in Formula One, and I think the rules have to change to stop. Now that I know that there's so much money in politics or whatever, and getting that to change is probably going to be impossible, but it's just wrong, and I hope it changes one day.
this is why I watch like I'm starting to watch IndyCar more, but we'll talk about that offline. Honestly, I think let's pivot away from the Red Bull and the Norris. I think we talked that to the ground. So the consensus is that Checo Perez will show up again later in another segment of our show. So let's talk about Mercedes. So you can't deny it. Russell was, did he win on pure merit? Hell no. But he was there where he needed to be, and it's situations like this that is a part of the F1 story and the DNA of F1 is to pick up the pieces when things falter ahead of you. And I think Russ was 15 seconds behind, but still, you know, in the right position that he needed to be in. He had a strong sprint race as well this week. So great job for him. Uh, I was a little concerned about Hamilton. Some of the self-inflicted wounds that he put on himself was the pit entry penalty that Mr. Piastri called out ever so lovingly, and then having to give back the position assigned after he overtook him on the initial, I think the initial lap. Uh, and he put a fight up against Russell, after in lap three, but after that he kind of just went to the back of the pack. In lap 62, Russell is 15 seconds behind Norris on hards, and Hamilton is 19 seconds behind Piastri in P6. It's a huge delta. And then in lap 64, when Russ finally takes position against P1, Toto comes over the line and says, like, George, you can do this, you can win this. And then when this race wraps up in lap 71, Hamilton is still 14 seconds behind Sainz in P4. He just couldn't bridge that gap this whole week. I don't know. Maybe he is kind of just, this is his way of kind of conceding the reins to Russell. But it wasn't very inspiring to kind of see him in that mode, knowing that he's going to go to Ferrari next year, and then kind of seeing that Ferrari maybe plateauing slightly, and kind of maybe even regressing into their old ways in certain ways. Give me your thoughts on Mercedes and Russell and Hamilton, Chris. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell because we've seen glimpses of Lewis coming back. You know, he was fighting for the last couple of races, but never really amounting, to exactly the old Lewis that we knew. I agree with you that maybe he's, kind of coasting a little bit and letting George take the reins, letting George have his moment because he knows he's transitioning. And I honestly, what you just brought up, I do worry about Ferrari because I think it looks like Mercedes is kind of on the up and up, and Ferrari is declining a little bit. And so,
I
there's
mean,
so much
there
more.
are talks of Renault or Alpine probably going to Mercedes as another purchaser of their engines, because I think three of the teams uses Ferrari, three of the teams uses Mercedes right now, and I think Renault is the other one, right? Right.
Yeah, and who are the Ferrari customers? It's Kick Sauber and Haas, which are
And then
not the
so
top
Kick Sauber
performing.
is going to be Audi, so Audi's going to make their own engines, and then I think the regulation is after your first 2 years, you still, if you can't sell your engine to another buyer until after 2 years or some shit like that. So Audi can even, Audi will come into it as the third manufacturing company that make their own engines. Red Bull, I think, is gonna go to Ford.
Yeah, so there hasn't been a whole lot of news on that. Like Red Bull still has Red Bull powertrains, and I don't exactly know what Ford's place is, but I know that Ford was looking to potentially exit the deal after the whole Horner thing.
So
I
it's still going
don't,
to be
but
Honda, but Honda's going to be
I
supplying Aston Martin, right?
yeah. So I really don't know where the whole Red Bull thing. I haven't heard any news on it, but it'll probably still likely be Ford. But I don't know. Like I think Ford is like slapping their logo on it, and Red Bull's still developing their own engine. So I really don't know the whole deal.
So I mean, Mercedes seems like they're in the best position with their powertrains from early reports. Aston Martin's going to switch away from them, but McLaren's going to be still purchasing Mercedes powertrains and engines. Mercedes themselves are going to be supplying themselves with their own engines, but that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, so Red Bull, I don't know what's going on with them. They might go through with Ford. I feel like because the dust is settling a little bit, Ford might still stick with it. Uh, but all that to say is that Ferrari seems like they're kind of stuck. At least they're not in the Aston Martin position where Aston Martin's kind of reeling back and dropping off their pace. Uh, but for Lewis next year, I don't know if it instills the most faith when the last few races Ferrari's been kind of in contention with Mercedes, but maybe even a little bit further back. So that's kind of where my head's at is like, has Lewis kind of completely checked out? Is he just going to do the Ferrari thing as a checkbox on his resume and collect his money, and then that's it? I think I'm having a hard time accepting the fact that Lewis Hamilton is going to not be a competitive force in the sport anymore, even if he is in a car that could get a couple of race wins. It just needs some TLC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super curious about the dynamic of Lewis and Charles too, because Ferrari has been very, outspoken, maybe not officially, but very obviously that Charles is the D1 in that team
Yeah,
over
that's not gonna fly
Carlos.
with that's not gonna fly with
And
Lewis.
yeah, so it's going to be like this like equal thing. And I think like they'll both play
That's
ball
not
for a
that's
little
probably not
bit.
gonna fly with Lewis either.
Yeah,
I think
probably,
he's
but
he's I think he's humble enough to like externally like not like make a thing of it, but over the course of what was he signed for 2 years, right? I
I
believe two
think
years.
so.
Yeah,
It's either two or three, but I think
yeah.
it's a minimum of two.
That's just not gonna fly with Lewis. He's like after a while, he's like I need my own autonomy here. Like and Charles is gonna have to like thing about Charles is he's having a hard time racing against Carlos. Do you think that bar is going to get easier when Lewis Hamilton gets in there? No, like I mean, this might just be another Freddie Vassar like pulling a magic rabbit out of or a rabbit out of his hat. But I don't know how many more he of those he has left. I mean, I don't want to discount him, but he could potentially come in and make mends with both drivers in a way that no other TP could. But that's a big ask, and on this end, like as I'm seeing like Russ kind of like take over the leadership position at least for the time being. I saw Kimi Antonelli liked his championship winning post on Instagram, so I don't want to stoke any fires here, but you heard it here first. I think he's out for blood. Uh, so when the Kimi Antonelli situation comes up, which I think that's going to be a more definitive like happening after the FIA kind of deemed a new rule for 17-year-olds that have exceptional like on track performance and whatever up to the discretion of the FIA. That's a big door they left open for Kimi Antonelli to come in. So there's an interesting power dynamic here, and it's hard to kind of tell where the power dynamic ends and just the drive begins, and they're so intermeshed in this situation. So that's my thought. I just it was a little bit jarring to me watching Hamilton race this week, and kind of how far he was behind Russell and even Signs. So I'll be curious to see if that's something that changes when he goes to Ferrari, or if that shit persists. Like that's gonna be a really sad story.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna reel this back real quick. I just want your quick opinion on something. So when Max and Lando were battling it out, we got that call that Lando had a black and white flag for track limits, and then they gave him an investigation for track limits, which
Mm-hmm.
was basically a slam dunk because we were like, oh shit, he has a black and white. They noticed it again, so he's probably going to get a penalty. But like lap after lap, we didn't hear the results of that until I don't even know if we ever did because they collided and he DNF'd. But Lewis Hamilton goes over the white pit line, and when I saw the replay, like he just basically had no grip and slid just a little bit and barely crossed the line. But he had a fucking penalty before like the next lap or whatnot. It was like 5 seconds, and I was like, I sometimes I just wonder, like, they're so consistent when it comes to these like speeding in the pit lane or crossing the white line, but then when it comes to other things that are like race, like so important to the race, affects the outcome, that it takes forever. And in the past, sometimes even after the race, for them to figure their stuff out. So, like, do you like that penalty that Lewis got? Like, he clearly didn't cross the white line intentionally, or
So
do
I
you think
think
it
I
was just
think there are
inconsistency?
two sets of issues here, and they're probably penalized differently. So I think Lewis got hit with a 5 second penalty because he he went out of the white lines entering the pit lane. Lando got a warning essentially for going off track. So all four tires were off track. I think you could get up to two of those before they administer like a 5 or 10 second uh, penalty. So I think that's why. So I think the in this scenario, if Lando and Verstappen didn't connect and the race ended and they both crossed the finish line, Max went first and Lando went second, what the issue would have been is, hey, Lando is not going to get a penalty because he had one warning, but Max, you overtook Norris and you went off track to do it, and you should have given track position back, and you didn't. When that happened, it let Norris, when Max didn't give the position back, from what I interpreted from like David Coulthard and all them talking about it, was that's giving essentially Lando a freebie to also go off track and go around Max. Those two would cancel each other out, is kind of what they're alluding to. But I think Lewis got the penalty because Piastri like saw him enter the pit lane and go over the white line, and that probably has a different penalty associated with it than when you're on track and you take all four wheels off the track. I think you have up to two times that you can do that, or three times before they actually administer the penalty.
Well, yeah, but so what they were saying on the announcers were saying was that Lando had already hit his 3 mark, and
Oh,
then and
I didn't know that.
yeah,
I
so
didn't know.
that like when so that's why they said that he had a black and white, is because he basically was like one more track limit
He probably did it
violation, and that's
twice.
the penalty.
Yeah.
And so then he was investigated for track limits, and they came over and said, "Uh oh, that means a penalty," but they never came back and said anything. I understand. I guess I was just curious whether you feel like there should be any leeway in these penalties, like going over the
I
pit
mean,
lane.
like it's probably because Lewis is black and Norris isn't. Like,
I guess so.
I mean, honestly, that's like mostly my answers on this show is going to be like a race thing. And you think
I
I'm
mean,
joking, but like when you boil it down, really, like it's that far from the truth.
well, I don't necessarily think you're joking. Like there was an incident in 2021 where they like officially found like a racist steward who was like making comments about Lewis Hamilton. Like obviously it exists.
Yeah,
Um,
what was it again? Nelson PK that I saw.
well, him too.
Yeah, that dude. And then
But
Helmet. They say some outlandish shit, bro. Some
I
out of
mean,
pocket shit.
it, you're going to be able to say a bunch of outlandish shit if you're as rich and powerful as these fucking guys are. It's insane. I mean, it like I don't really know the full truth of this whole Christian thing, like to be the fly on the wall, but like if he was, if he did like officially do sexual harassment against the person, like there's no consequences for them. So, but
Well, that was a great segue into that topic. Let's talk about something a little bit more fun. So, uh, let's talk about Alpine, the team that always gives and keeps on giving. Because wherever there's pain, there's going to be spectators, and they're no different. So on lap 36, Ocon essentially runs Gasly off the track. and while doing so, also impedes Alonso for P9. So Ocon's essentially like, look, fuck you and fuck that dude too. I hate both of y'all. And that was pretty much in I don't think he got penalized for it, but they're talking about how Bruno Famine was like probably super pissed about it, and I can imagine. But I don't know, maybe it was David Coulthard. But he's like, what are you gonna do? Like fire Ocon twice? Like what are you gonna do? You know? So it's just like I think this. I mean, Pierre actually ended up getting into the points. I think he ended up getting. He got P10. You know, he got one single point, and Esteban came in at 12. You know, so I don't know. I think Esteban Ocon really doesn't give a flying fuck anymore, and he's okay with showing that.
I mean,
Where do you think they
hon-
go from here?
honestly, if I was fired from my team publicly and I still had to drive for them, I wouldn't give a fuck either. Honestly, like I, it's just it is what it is. Like he's either gonna have a job next year or he's not. But I wouldn't give a fuck. But it was actually kind of intense watching them race so hard wheel to wheel. And I forget who it was, but one of the engineers came over and was kind of saying like, "All right, guys, we need to bring both these cars home like in one piece." And one of the drivers said, "Fuck that."
No. That was Haas.
Oh,
That
that
was
was Haas.
Haas. Yeah,
Oh,
that was a great team radio. That was essentially uh, Hulkenberg was like I think slightly behind K Mag, and they wanted it to get the well. Let me reset it. So I think Hulkenberg was in front of K Mag, and they didn't want them to like race hard against each other because they're both up in the points.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
so they came over the radio was like, "Hey Kevin, we're trying to make our tires last." And Kevin was like, "Hey, is you saying the same thing to Hulk?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, fuck that. I'm gonna like we're not both gonna save our tires." He's like, "I'm gonna get the overtake." But
yeah.
that's I mean, like I said, you are who you are, you know, like especially when the moment still has a little bit more pressure. And K Mac has much more pressure on him now than Nico Hulkenberg does. Nico Hulkenberg is pretty much set up in probably one of the nicest, cushiest jobs in Formula One for the next 2 years to come.
Yeah, I mean, fully agree. But yeah, sorry, made that mistake. But back to Alpine, like, listen, they just need to ride out the end of the year, and they need to figure like there has to be changes internally. Like they're really not gonna make that much progress if they don't figure out their organization and have a good driver pairing. But these guys clearly hate each other. I mean, when Gasly was over the radio just like bitching about wanting to get around Alonso, and then him fighting hard against Ocon. Then when he passes him, he's like, "Ciao!" Like they clearly like they're at each other's throats, and yeah, I really don't know where they go from here. But like Gasly has his seat, and he defines himself as the D1 driver now because of that. And I think he just wants Esteban gone as soon as possible. And he clearly thinks he's the better driver. So I don't think we're done with the fireworks between these two guys before the end of the year. So and we'll see if Esteban is able to secure a seat or not. I between Esteban and Sainz and some of these other drivers, I think we're going to get a few unexpected exitings of F1.
Yeah, I mean, with Alpine, they signed the technical director that left from McLaren, David Sanchez. So, I mean, again, it takes so long for those kinds of effects to go through the entire organization and for
Yep.
us to see it as as end viewers, right? Like I think David Sanchez, we talked about this earlier. He signed up with McLaren, and then everyone realized, hey, this isn't the job that I signed up for. And then it was a weird exit that I don't know if it was a forced exit or if it was a mutual exit or whatever, but he left even before the year ended. And then now that he's at Alpine, I guess it makes sense. You know, a shitty place attracts like people who are like in a transient phase of their lives. You know, I hate that Alpine has to kind of go through that. Um, but again, yeah, I think that hedging your entire team on Pierre Gasly's shoulder. Like I like Gasly, but I don't think he's like that driver. You know, they need to dig deep and find someone or poach someone that's very young and super talented. Maybe it's Jack Doohan. I don't know. I hear like he's very active with the team and does a lot of simulation work and is very active like in other ways with the team.
I,
Um,
I
but
hear
yeah, it's just like they haven't hit the right formula. Like that's just kind of how it is.
the thing I worry about doing is and there's obviously been rumors that he's going to be on that team. Is that I'm not 100% familiar, but I've heard that like Logan Sargent like kicked his ass in F2, and it's like if Logan Sargent is beating Jack Doohan in a sport, then he's probably not gonna be the shining star you need him to be.
I mean, if you're really, really good at what you do, bro, you go get fucking Liam Lawson. And you're like, Liam, you're not getting a fucking drive with these guys. We've made at least a little bit of progress, and we have a roadmap to putting you as our poster child. You have Pierre Gasly there with you. I don't think they have any contention between themselves. And, Pierre's actually like a pretty good teammate. Look at how he was with Yuki. And Liam's like just young enough to where he doesn't really pose a threat to Pierre, at least at first. And then it could be like you got to make a move that puts you like you had Fernando Alonso, you had Oscar Piastri in the stables. You lost him because of an inept leadership like team. Go get someone that's a fucking like a snake and have him go get Liam Lawson or someone that's like in a position that go get a Yuki Tsunoda. Like you have these little pockets of potential that you can get. You just need to get the gumption to be able to go get it. I feel like there's just a team that's very reactionary and kind of just waiting for things to come to them. Right? They're like a bottom feeder. All
Yeah,
right, that might have been kind of tough, but that's like the kind of animal I see them as, like these little suction cups at the bottom of the seabed, just taking in plankton.
yeah. I mean, like we've talked about it ad nauseum with these guys. Like they need to make big changes. They need good drivers. Like I'm tired of everyone playing it safe. Under this cost cap era, just like trying to make sure that your cars get around and that you finish. Because like there's teams that seem like they're playing the Haas game. Like Haas is basically a billboard, and they're just trying to make sure that they don't spend a bunch of money on parts. And they're not aiming for WDC. And
But
I want
honestly, man, I'm going to tip my hat to Ayo Komatsu. Like that dude's steering a steady ship, and like I'm going to give him that because like whereas it was volatile as hell with Gunther, as entertaining as it was very volatile with Gunther in the seat. And Ayo Komatsu has been able to kind of at least like show some sort of steadiness in working with what he's got. So I just wanted to interject and say that.
I fully agree there. Like, as much as Gunther was like fun to watch, 2021's over, and I think Ayakomatsu is a very good team principal. I'm excited for this next generation of TPs. So, um, yeah, I kind of want 2025 to already be over with and heading into 2026 so that we can really see like the evolution of all these guys and the
Chris,
team.
I think 2025 is going to have some good shit to offer.
I agree, but I'm like I want to see like a whole level playing field. But yes, I think every team, more and more teams are going to be like up to the challenge next year because we're the last year of these regs, and I think next year is going to be
And
like
Lewis
far.
is going to and Lewis is going to a new team. It's just going to be a very entertaining season next season, I think.
Yeah, and Toto, maybe Max will go to Mercedes because Toto keeps
Because
stroking that.
I mean, Jost is not happy with Christian Horner. It seems like an irreparable situation with them too.
Well, listen, like what happened was Christian was basically just a huge toddler, and Yost was asked to drive like an old car, and Christian did everything in his power to block him from doing that. And it was just like this battle between these
Jost
guys.
also crashed like a rally car last week, I think,
I
doing
think I
some sort
saw
of like
that.
series. I was like, dude, just be a good dad. Like, stop doing this. I don't
They just need
know.
a band fathers from the pit lane, I guess.
Except for Checo and Lewis, those guys are nice.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on over to winners and losers in our hot seats. Who you got in your winners circle this week?
Well, I'm sure we both have Russell, even though officially didn't, win on officially merit, but he was there to pick up the pieces when other people crash out. This is a thing in sports. You got to be third to be first if first and second go out. So I'm glad he didn't over celebrate as if he earned it. He at least was humble in some of his words about,
Pulled out the
we
old yabba dabba do.
yeah, yabba dabba doo. But it was it was actually really funny because if you look at the cool down room, it was the D2 podium. It was like the George Russell to Lewis, the Oscar to Lando, and the who was the last one? Science to Leclerc. So it was like officially the D2 podium. But
I,
you know,
yeah, I think he probably saw us, and Twitter and all the social medias have been all up in it. But in the cool down room, George was like, "Yeah, that was some really cool racing." When he was talking about Max and Norris, and Piastri's like, "Yeah, of course it was. It helped you win a race." And
yeah.
I was like, "Dude, this guy's cold blooded, dude. Like he's so dry and like I love Oscar Piastri, man. I think he's got a great career ahead of him.
Well, hopefully it's not next year, but when Valtteri finally leaves the sport, I fully believe that Oscar's going to be his like spiritual replacement. I love his sense of humor. He's got a good head on his shoulders, so I'm very excited for the future years of Oscar Piastri, who's the next guy on my winner's circle. So yeah, Oscar had a really great weekend from the sprint race to the race. He got P2 in both races. And the thing that I was most excited about was that Oscar Piastri wasn't scared to overtake Lando in the sprint race when he was battling it out with Max, and like was able to make that pass and stick it, and had no issues with being like, oh, Lando's fighting for the championship. Lando's in P2 in the driver standings. He was like, no, I'm going to make this overtake. These guys messed up, and I'm here to fight for myself. So he had a really good Raken overall, and I'm just excited to see for his future.
Yeah, I
Who?
mean, he had in lap 65, he had one of the best overtakes of the entire race, where he went for P2, went around the outside of Carlos Sainz, and steady hands. I think like he might have some lapses every now and again, but by and large, he's a very capable driver, and I think he's only going up and to the right more and more as the weeks go
Yep.
by. So yeah, he's also in my winner circle.
I'll let you talk about this next one in a second, but I'm gonna talk about just Max real quick, just because like I already said this earlier, but he came out super ahead because Leclerc didn't earn any points, Lando didn't earn any points, and he was able to get his car into the pits, put softs on. I mean, by the way, oh, we'll get to this in a second, but yeah, so good weekend for Max, and in terms of overall result for the championship. And then these next two guys are on here because it's Daniel Ricciardo and Logan Sargent. Not that Logan Sargent deserves to be in the winners, but in sprint qualifying, for the first time ever, he outqualified Alex Albon on pure merit and pace, so that's probably the only time he's ever going to get to say that before he exits the sport. So tiny win for him that he could say that he wasn't flawless victoried over the course of his entire career. And then Daniel Ricciardo, was able to get points in P9 and outperform Yuki Tsunoda, who got 14th. And so, out of all the things that the ups and downs that Danny has had, at least he's has resemblance of being able to get a point here and there. But who knows if it'll be enough?
I mean, I guess yeah, you might as well want to put them on there while you can, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess we'll round it out with Haas. Just a very effective week this week. Nothing too special. They kept it even keel. They didn't get into each other's ways. Even with K Mag like putting in that fuck that kind of air out there, like he kept everything tamed, and I think that's all they could ask for. They collected some great points. They were able to split Sergio Perez, got P6 and P8, some good points there. They're now ahead of Alpine in the Constructors' Championship, which If you were told me that a year ago, I probably wouldn't have put money on that. But here we are, right? So I think again, we talked about Akamatsu's ability to kind of lead the ship and make the right decisions and work creatively with the constraints that they have, which are much more constraints than other teams around them. But they seem like they got something going here. I'd be curious to see if they can or have a seamless handoff with Ollie Behrman and if they decide, I don't know if they're going to decide to bring K Mag back, especially with Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas sitting out there. But never say never.
Yep. So yeah, losers. Let's go. Like, obviously, we're both going to talk about Lando. Had a lot going for him. He's very clearly going to be P2 in the championships if things can and stay the same. Could potentially fight for the win if Max has reliability issues. I think there's already a scheduled, penalty for him later in the season, but very likely going to be P2 in the championship. So it just sucks for him not scoring points from a collision that was, a little bit silly all around. Probably shouldn't have happened. And yeah, that it could have gone better for him. But I think the positives to take from the weekend are that he's very clearly fighting for potential wins, and it's going to be a really great rest of the season. And then Charles Leclerc. I mean, like you said earlier in the podcast, where's Ferrari? What's happening? Did he have damage? Did he have a collision? Because
Yeah. His front wing got clipped early on in the race. I forgot who it was with, but yeah, he got clipped early in the race. They had to put him into the pit, and then they just never really recovered after that. He just kept staying behind further and further, and he made a couple positions, but yeah. I think at one point they even were like, "Hey, Charles, like we're in a good place for you to come in and get some points." I don't think he got it. Did he get any points? I don't think he got any points.
we got P11.
He got
Like
P11. Yeah, so they gave him false hope still. And,
they
yeah,
threw hards on his car,
yeah,
and then
they're like Charles, like you're in a good position to get points, and then this dude didn't get points. So like, I don't know. And they said it confidently too. The pit wall said it super confidently, which is
they put
interesting.
hards on his car, and he did 16 laps or 15 laps
And then came right
on the
back.
hard,
Yeah.
and then they put him right back on the mediums. It's like, and then they were like, "You can make points." Like very clearly, that wasn't going to happen. But
Yeah, he had a four. He had a four stopper, and then two of those were used mediums. So yeah, it's just they just didn't really set him up for success at all.
I mean, that guy has so many,
I
polarizing seasons.
just like speak up, dude. Like say something. Like fucking. Like I don't understand. Like Science started off with fresh mediums, went to fresh hards, and went back onto fresh mediums. Like I'd be like, dude, put me on his strategy. Like why is his strategy? His strategy was the norm essentially for everyone, and then Leclerc was the standout. I guess Verstappen had softs at the end, but like yeah, it was just I don't know, man. That
Well,
it was just
that's the one thing
ass
I like
backwards.
about Carlos over Charles. Even if he doesn't have that pure it factor, that raw talent over Charles, he's still a great driver. But the entire season in like 22 or 23, I can't remember, Carlos was basically self-engineering himself around the track, making calls, being aggressive, telling the engineers what to do. Because like he's out on track, he's feeling the tires, he's feeling the balance. He's like, no, this is the call. Like I just don't see that in Charles. Maybe a little bit from time to time, but not enough. So, but it, I just I want to see like I'm excited for Lewis to be there, so I want to see Ferrari winning races and making these aggressive things. But I guess it's just not in the cards for them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see about Charles. I don't have the highest hopes, to be quite honest.
Anybody else on
Um,
your losers?
yeah, so this is actually someone that I like, and this is endemic of the entire team. But Fernando Alonso, I put him on my losers bracket this week, and it's been a long time coming. Actually, in the last couple of weeks, he's been struggling in qualifying. He finished P18. The best thing that happened to him this weekend was that he got fastest lap on lap 70. It's just he didn't qualify that well either. I think he qualified. Um, where did he qualify? He qualified 14th, like or sorry 15th. It's just very lackluster. And the backdrop of all this is that they just signed Lance Stroll to I think like another 2-year deal. This is essentially where I can see Fernando Alonso's career coming to an end is in the next year. Is essentially you look at your options, you realize that the top teams are pretty locked in with who they got. There might be a pitch for Red Bull if Sergio just goes completely left ways, which I think is the final saving grace for Fernando Alonso. But right now, he's just in such a tight position. He's not really fighting for anything. He's kind of, it kind of lost the wind beneath his sails in certain ways. So I'm going to put Fernando Alonso up on my loser circle this week. I think it's not just him, but the entirety of Aston Martin is taking heavy steps backwards. And with re-signing Lance Stroll, it's just kind of fortifying the fact that Lawrence Stroll doesn't really care a whole lot about getting constructors or whatever. He just cares about his kid being in the sport, which, in one way it's really nice and beautiful, and another way it totally sucks as a fan to watch that shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you want my honest opinion, I think Fernando at some point in the last year had a very serious contemplation about his retirement and when that's going to be. And I think once you have that like feeling, that mental feeling of like, I think my career is coming to an end, I think you lose whatever that itch is to win championships or to want to win races because you're starting to think about how am I closing out my career in F1. And I just, when he first got into that Aston Martin and he took the car around Bahrain 2 years ago or whatever, and it was amazing. And they podiumed and then podiumed and then podiumed and podiumed. You saw this glimpse of a potential future of, holy shit, I can win races. Maybe we can compete for WDCs. And then, like you said, like the car went backwards a little bit, and he doesn't have a teammate that he can learn from or compete with. It's Lance. And then, you probably start seeing the inner workings of the team. And I think, like you just said, I think you lost a little bit of that motivation. I think Aston Martin is focused on, Lance and probably other aspects of it. And it's just not motivating enough. And now he has the golden parachute. Like he's got a contract that like gives him a management position in Aston Martin. So I think he's mentally checked out. I just don't know if he'll do it at the end of this season or at the end of next year. I don't know. But, you know, Lance is his teammate. It's probably not that exciting.
Yeah. All right, let's go to hot seats. We got the same person, so I'll let you start.
Yeah, Sergio, like it amounts to this. Max drove on three wheels, very slowly around the track, pit, got a 10-second penalty, had a massively screwed up pit stop, and finished 17 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. That is insane. Like, Max should have basically been out of this race in P20 or whatever and had just had everything thrown at him and still finished ahead of his teammate. That's essentially the most embarrassing thing that I've ever seen. So Sergio has to do something in the next like couple races to really show that he's back on form. Otherwise, I think he's in huge trouble.
I think the season's gonna kind of be this for Sergio. I think the remainder of the season going to be. He already signed a 2-year deal. It's a 1+1. We talked about this too, but essentially, like it's one of those things where all you need to do is just be under the radar. Here's the thing: if everything was running very smoothly at Red Bull in terms of the car, if they just had a repeat of 2022 before this drama with Christian happened, when everything was just smooth sailings, like they would have been able to scrutinize the hell out of Sergio even more, and like kind of put him in under the gun. But they he keeps Max happy. He's not like pushing the envelope too much. Uh, Max is now dissatisfied because of the performance of the car, which after a while I think that'll now evolve into a distaste for Checo because Checo's not picking up the pieces. And then you have the full circle of fire in a sort of ways, right? You have the management bickering, you have division between the management and parties involved with your star driver. Your star driver is not really liking the car. your head engineer and designer famously is leaving. Who knows where he's going to? He might go to a competitor. Your second driver, who was kind of flying beneath the radar, is now also full frontal because they're not getting they're not optimizing the points that they get for the construction championship. This is a boiler room situation, bro. Like I think, like what is it? Icarus flies too close to the sun. That whole story. Like I think this is what's happening. They are just like pulling at the last stretches of success before the entire thing just goes up in flames and they just restart again. That's the feeling I'm getting. Maybe I'm being dramatic about it, but I think Checo's deficiencies are going to be a, a significant portion of the failure of this team as a whole if things continue the way that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The only semi argument I'll make about the contract is that it may be a 2-year contract, it may be a 1+1, but Red Bull is very known to have performance clauses and or the ability with that junior team to swap seats. And so, there might be a
It's
scenario where they
fucking
put
wild to me. It makes no sense to me.
yeah, but they did it to Gasly and
They did the
Albon. Like,
Albon, yeah.
yeah, so like it's very possible that if Liam comes in for Daniel, that they swap Liam and Checo, or maybe Yuki gets his shot. Like if
Yeah, I don't think
Checo
it's gonna
doesn't
happen.
do this, I don't
I
think
don't
it's
think
going to
it's gonna
happen either.
happen. Yeah.
But like it might happen for half a season if they really just need to make a change and see what's what. But yeah, who knows what's going to happen at Red Bull? I do think what you're talking about. I think they're on a seesaw's edge. Like if you take the scales of justice and you're like putting a pea or a rock on one side, I think Red Bull could tilt the wrong way and have like a massive falling out in the next couple of years, like where Adrian leaves, Ford comes in, maybe they like screw it all up, they don't get their driver situation figured out. Maybe Max leaves in a year or two because the team's falling apart, the performance is dropping, and then Red Bull's just kind of caught with their pants down and doesn't really know what to do. Because, like you said, they've screwed up this junior program. They don't really know what's the future of Red Bull if Max leaves. Right now, there is literally none. The only thing that they have going for them is money, and they could probably pay to get a good driver. But other than that, like you said, the pieces are there for a potential downfall. Like you said, it could be dramatic, but it's definitely a possibility.
It'd be really tight if Ford came in and they're like, we need an American driver. So they went and got Joseph. They went and got Joseph Newgarden from IndyCar, and they're like, look, we got a double IndyCar 500, Indy 500 winner, and like a 3-time like Formula One winner. So like, fuck with us, like that would be. I'm just saying, like that would just be like a fucking hell of a strategy if if that were something that Ford was interested in. I think they could make something like that happen. But yeah, I've been watching a lot of IndyCar. Sorry, man.
Oh, I'm starting. Like I literally, when I started watching F1, it took me a long time to get into F1 just because I know I have an addictive personality, and I knew that this would happen. That I would like love it, watch practice, watch quality, watch everything, watch the interviews, and then eventually start a podcast about it, just because how obsessive I am. So I like weary of watching other sports. But when I watched the 24-hour Le Mans, I was like, "Damn it! I think I'm going to start watching other motorsports," which is what I think Fernando Alonso should do. I think he should be done with F1 and focus on becoming the second Triple Crown winner, because he's the only. I forget how many people. I think it might be only him and one other person who have two of the legs of the Triple Crown, and only one person's ever done it in history. So go get that Triple Crown, Fernando. Get out of Lance Stroll's shadow.
Yeah, well, what we got coming up? So next week is the end of the triple header. Is going to be
Silverstone, baby.
in Silverstone.
Home race for Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Ollie Behrman to be. I guess Lando as well.
And Lando, yeah, all the Brits will be there. I wish I was there. I'd like to be British,
Same.
but imperialism, it worked against my people. Um, that's another podcast. Uh, so we'll be back Monday. The race takes place Sunday morning, our time at 9 a.m. So we'll have another episode out to you guys on Monday. But
Um,
until then, what do you got, Chris?
quick prediction from you. Do you think we're going to
Oh,
see a repeat Lando Norris and
mm,
Max into Cop's corner from Lewis Hamilton Max 2021 51G crash? You think Lando and Max are going to butt heads once again?
I think Carlos Sainz is going to be up there. I think he'll be P3. I think George Russell will get P2, and I think Max Verstappen gets P1. I think Lando Norris has an okay race, but I think Piastri does better than him. I think that's going to be my prediction. Well, actually, let's swap that out. Sorry, man. Verstappen, Russell, Piastri, Sainz, Norris, Hamilton.
Man, well, I want the Brits. I'm gonna say Max crashes out because Lando punts him, and then we're gonna get a Lando, Lewis, and George podium. Wouldn't that be amazing?
There's gonna be so much alcohol like on the streets of London or whatever
Dude,
the hell
did
they
you
are.
see how drunk George looked? Did you see that picture of him on the plane
No,
celebrating? He looked
no, but
way
I mean, I don't blame him. I'd be wasted too if I just won a Grand Prix.
100%. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good to have a triple header. I'm excited for Silverstone. It's always a great race. Hopefully, we'll be there next year. That's my plan, and we'll be back, you guys, on Monday of next week.
Until then, peace out, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Shayem and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.